View from the Tower podcast. This week, we're going to be talking about two new movies just a little bit. We're going to talk a little more about issues instead of the movies and just bring them up when it's applicable. But the movies are called District 9 and Eye in the Sky. So, Joe, do you want to start?
More specifically, we're going to be focusing on refugees and just the overall concept of war and whether or not it's just, what it means to have a just war, whether or not that's even a valid question. It's going to be really in depth. We're not really going to discuss the movies very in depth. They're just related to the topic at hand, and it's going to be more focused on concepts today instead of the movies overall.
I'll just give you like a quick recap of what these movies are about. District 9 is a movie about like an alien, not invasion, but like an alien thing where these aliens get stranded on Earth and like they're sort of like take the place of refugees. It's like a symbolic movie. And then Eye in the Sky is all about drones and like drone warfare and all of the moral stands and the political, legal stands of that. And so yeah, they're both really good movies, and if you get the chance, you should watch them. But we're like Joe said, we're going to talk a little more about issues today instead of the movies. So are we going to do refugees first?
Yeah.
Okay. So obviously in America, there's this huge issue, current event of refugees and Syrian refugees in particular, and what we should do with them and how we should help them, if we should help them, what should we do? So we're going to talk a little bit about what we think about that based on some reading we've done and, of course, these movies as well. So I just like to start off by saying that I just think that there's no, like, simple answer to this, obviously. We're going to talk about it and debate about it here, but, I mean, this is all just our opinion. So obviously none of this is, like, super right, I guess. You could have, everybody has their own opinion. So, Joe?
Yeah, we discussed it a lot in our international relations class this week, this previous 2 weeks really, and we talked about the various options as far as the course of action for the United States within the Middle East. There's the civil war going on in Syria right now is between Bashar al-Assad and the Islamic State. We really don't want to pick a side, but we really got to put a stop to this. It's a civil war. It can't go on forever. There's people being displaced that have absolutely nothing to do with the conflict, but they're having to leave their home because of the threat that they might die at any moment because of either party.
Access or the government.
They could very easily be killed. So they're having to go all over the world to find places to stay and to settle down, possibly for forever, but hopefully it's in the hopes that they can one day go home. The United States could, we could set up a no-fly zone. We could just, do multiple different things. We could help aid the countries that surround Syria, so we can help them to better accommodate all the refugees that are flooding in the countries. We could go to war with either side. And in the process making allies with the side that we took, or we could go to war with both sides, either by ourselves or with our European allies. So we could, it's really, really complicated whenever you think about all the various options. It's a really hard issue because you don't want to make the wrong move. Whatever it is, you want to make sure that you're doing something good, but it's extremely important that you, at the same time, you don't do the wrong thing. Um, because if you mess up, there's going to be an issue, and there's no option that really doesn't involve any type of bloodshed. I mean, if the United States became adopted isolationism as their policy, more innocent civilians in Syria are going to be killed, and either ISIS or Bashar al-Assad is going to win the war, and neither of those we are really that good of an option. Um, so it's just there's no easy way out. There is no um, simple trick to just make everything work out beautifully. There's always going to be some type of negative repercussion, and so I'm,
Yeah. Okay. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, along with Joe's point about how important it is to make the right move, I think it's interesting when you look at how in the beginning, everyone was so focused on trying to help everyone and like trying to find a place for them to be and where to live at. But then as soon as those people that slipped through, terrorists, they slipped through with the refugees and they had those bombs. As soon as that happened, everyone was like, no, we can't do this. So everything became more serious to everyone because they were trying to consider, well, what if this can happen again? What if we're allowing these people to come into our countries and someone slips through that's going to harm tons of people? So I think that caused it to become even more serious for everyone involved in this situation. And I think that kind of backs up what Joe was saying about how everyone's trying to consider what the right move is to provide the best safety for them.
And I think this is an interesting line from this article. It says resettlement is only one of three options. Obviously, resettlement in the U.S., Britain, all the big countries that have been providing refuge. The others are returning home, which for most Syrians is impossible, obviously, or remaining in the host country, which given the pressures Turkey, Jordan, and Lebanon are under, is becoming increasingly difficult. I think something interesting, me and Joe were talking about this a little bit ago. Everybody's kind of thinks that, okay, well, there's all this pressure to like relocate refugees to the United States, Germany, Britain, all these big countries. But honestly, I feel like that's not a good idea because it costs so much money to get from Syria to the United States, for example. We would have to sink millions of dollars into transportation, not to mention once they get here, food, shelter, all that kind of stuff. And we don't even have enough jobs to support ourselves right now. Why not plus another thing is our social and cultural aspects are not nearly the same as theirs. And I just feel like there's so much pressure to do that. And
it's a struggle for them to integrate into American society. Mm-hmm. It's just a different world, really. Mm-hmm. Eastern versus, yeah, it's like an Eastern versus Western type thing. But also, she talked about the countries like Syria, Jordan and Lebanon and all those countries surrounding Syria. I remember back in November, whenever Ben Carson went down to see those countries that are accepting all the refugees directly from Syria, and he talked to a lot of them, and he said that a lot of them just discussed wanting to be, just discuss the possibility of being able to go back to Syria. They really don't want to have to go through all this stuff. The thing that they want most is to go back to Syria, and they don't really. I mean, it would help some of them because they want to come to America, but most of them want to just go back to. They want life to go back to normal, And obviously, since there's a civil war going on, that's not an option immediately. So we can't that can't happen right now. Sydney, do you want to say something?
Yeah, so my question to both of you would be, what should we do? Should we just abandon them in their country or just leave them there with nowhere else to go while civil war rages where they could be killed at any moment and at any time? What should we do if we're not going to let them into other countries?
I would say do more to support the surrounding countries that are similar to their culture, because I feel like that would be, if I, this is going to be kind of far-fetched, but say America were to go into a civil war, I wouldn't want to go all the way to Syria. I would want to go to probably Canada or Mexico because it's close. So if I had to come back home, I could afford it. And the culture around Syria is not, I'm not going to say it's the same. It's obviously not, but I feel like it's more similar there than it would be here. They at least speak some of the same languages. And we've already talked a little bit about like how Turkey and Lebanon and Jordan are feeling the weight. They've got lots and lots of refugees, much more than any other countries. And I feel like we should be doing our absolute best to help them, because so many refugees can't even afford to come to the United States. And even in this article, it says it's talking about if there's a certain family that this article is about, and it says at one point, this is talking about their children. After nearly a year, neither spoke enough English to hold a conversation, and they spent their downtime watching Arabic language news about Syria or YouTube videos from home. So even though they're in America where there's all this opportunity and for new life, they still are kind of stuck in that they want to go home. And that's understandable. Like, I wouldn't want to stay in another country for the rest of my life. I would probably want to go home. And I just feel like it's just, I don't know. I feel like it's interesting that a lot of people think that moving to America or any of these other big countries is like the only option. I feel like that should be the last resort. I mean, obviously we can't abandon them in their own country, but moving them thousands of miles away from their country and then trying to send them back, that just seems like not smart to me.
Going back to what Ben Carson said about it, he was discussing, what the best options, what the options were at the time, because that was a lot. Seems like it might have been more toward the forefront of political issues at the time. It's kind of gone under the rug a little bit now, but it's still a pretty big issue. But I think the question arises from this, from his experience: what is best for those people?
What do they want?
Is it really the best for them that they come to this new place, and that, in the article, the article's entitled "Why is it so difficult for Syrian refugees to get into the United States?" From the New York Times, and we in it, like, the family that it focuses on talked about struggling with the expenses that were unforeseen as they came over to America. They have to pay $52 for internet, $40 for garbage collection, $1,125 for rent, just repayment on the United States loan for plane tickets from Amman to America, $172. I mean, that they did not see these expenses coming at them whenever they talked about coming to America.
And life is so much. I feel like living cost is more here, anyways.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a high cost. There's a very high cost of living.
People in other countries live on like hundreds of dollars a month, whereas we live on thousands a month.
And when you look at how long it took them to get here, from like an immediate, like, okay, yes, they get to go, it's still like 18 months before they can actually move. Is that what?
Yeah, at least 18 months before they get through the screening process. and then that's only the financial struggles that they're going through.
Not to mention political.
We discussed the like their children had been in school for a year and still didn't know enough English to really hold a steady conversation. They the kids that normally come from that area, like they quickly adopt they more quickly adopt the English language, I should say, because they listen to YouTube videos and they kind of integrate themselves into
if they want to come
into
here.
the society through the entertainment industry, and they learn the language a little bit easier because they listen to those videos. But those kids were listening to Arabic news broadcasts. They were, which I mean, that means that they were focused on going back home. They want to see what's happening over there. They're interested in it. They want to know what's happening to their home country. They want to go home, but there's a war going on, and so it's just really difficult to examine what exactly the best option is. Maybe coming to America would be good for some of them, but it's obvious that it's not the best for all, because it's a hard thing to integrate into such a different society. Were you going to say something, Sarah?
Yeah, I was going to say how you mentioned the refugees, all they wanted to do was they kind of want to just go home. It's not that they want to come here and set their whole life here and just base everything out of here. But in the movie that we watched in District 9, you see the aliens, that their spaceship, that it broke down over
Cape Town, I think. Cape Town, South Africa, maybe.
I think it was
Johannesburg.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
that's
broke
right.
down over Johannesburg. And in the beginning, they were trying so hard to fix their spaceship so that way they could go home. But they ended up turning into refugees, and people wanted to do experiments and things on them. But they weren't violent people until everyone started looking at them in an alien type way.
And they gave up on going home, sort of, because they felt helpless.
Yeah, but that was just their dream too, is they just wanted to make it back to their home planet. They didn't want to settle down where they were at. It wasn't like they wanted to intrude on everyone else's lives. They just wanted to carry on with their own.
Exactly. I think that's something we kind of forget in the United States, is we want to say, oh, these refugees, they just want to come over here and take advantage of welfare and all this stuff. That's really not true. I feel like for most of them, it's just they don't have anywhere else to go. They just don't. I mean, we're their last hope, their only hope. And so that's why, I don't know, I just still feel like it's kind of dumb to think that we should just bring them all over here, because I don't think that's logistically possible, really. I mean, it's possible, but like it's probably not the smartest move. I just feel like there has to be some other way to keep them closer to their country, and then maybe try to get Syria back to being peaceful, which is kind of a crazy thing to say, but it shouldn't be.
And like I said earlier, we don't really want to pick a side in this, but at the same time, the Civil War has to stop at some point, because there are people in the world that need to go back home, and they're unable to because of two parties that are fighting. And we could say, well, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, but I mean, I'm not sure really. You could choose either side based on that logic. It's Bashar al-Assad versus ISIS, two notoriously violent parties, and one of them is like a dictatorial figure that treats his people unjustly, and the other is a terrorist organization I think at this point it's the largest in the world. Um, so, obviously we don't want to pick the side of ISIS because they want to eradicate
Western
pretty much just
civilization.
anything Western. They just want it to be eradicated from the earth. But at the same time,
So,
can we pick a side? And I mean, is that
in my mind, they
Re-
both need to go. But I mean,
Yeah.
how would that work? Is the thing. How can
do
you
we
fight
step
to-
in? Do we step in and stop both of them? Do we say, listen, we're just going to end it all? We're going to
And how powerful does that lead
Right.
to? And what, like, the Islamic State rose because Al Qaeda was gone. What does that then create?
Yeah, I mean, they're like weeds. You pull one up, another one takes its place.
Yeah.
It's terribly complicated.
And it leaves the question too of a lot of people will say, okay, well, who is the United States to take this in their stride and say, okay, well, we're going to fix all of this. But like, my thing, and the thing that bothers me about that is, okay, if we're not supposed to be the arbitrator in the world, then why should we have to take all the Syrian refugees either if it's not technically our place to intrude on their society? Like that's a selfish way of thinking, but I mean, I feel like it's a valid question. If we're not gonna,
Why does the world get to look to us for? They look to us first whenever something needs to be done.
If we don't eradicate the problem, we're just gonna have more and more refugees as time goes on. We have to stamp out the problem, not just treat
the symptoms. We can't.
Right, exactly.
We got to
Treat the
stop the
symptoms.
disease instead of treating the symptoms.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
It's not really a matter of, if there was no war, there would be no need to discuss the issue of refugees
Right.
concerning the Syrians that were displaced. But that's the root of the problem. That's where you should go to look at the courses of action, because that's what needs to be focused on. That's the issue that needs to be examined. All these, the Syrians are really suffering from it too. Like it's hard for the whole world because all this humanitarian aid is going into it, and it seems like there's not enough. Like it seems like they're already the conditions are still poor, and we don't want these people to have to live in refugee camps. But we don't want them to, if they come over here and they're unable to handle the just living expenses in America, they're going to be struggling here just as much as they would be over there, just for possibly,
like what's the point? Yeah, like we have to find some middle ground that's gonna work, which is hard. I mean, that's just like an insane question that obviously two people can't answer by themselves. But and there's all kinds of political issues in the way, relationships between countries. It's just crazy. It's crazy to think like, okay, how can the rest of the world, like there's so many other countries, how can we not like figure out what to do? We're against ISIS and Assad. How can 70 other countries not figure out some solution? And I think that all goes back to just how it just proves how complicated of an issue this is, because it's rooted in culture. It's rooted in, it's not like it's the citizens versus the government. It's a terrorist organization versus the government, which is also weird. I feel like that's not ever happened before. The civilians almost have no part in the conflict. They're just kind of innocent bystanders. And it's just really interesting. So I think now we're going to move on to the second movie. The topic's introduced in the second movie, Eye in the Sky. It's all about drone warfare and like all the moral justifications of war. Yeah, and like what have we become in a war sense, I guess.
Should we give like a little preview of what the movie was?
A synopsis. Yeah.
Well, in the movie, there is this crew that they're watching a group of people over in Kenya, and they watch them and they find out that there's a whole group of them that have
They have suicide bombing equipment
yes.
in a
And
house.
so then they decide that they're going to drop a drone on this house. And as they are getting ready to do so, they see a little girl that is selling bread to bring in money for her family. They see her come into the frame of where she could potentially get killed. And so that brings up the question of, should we do this to save this one innocent life, or do we wait? And so they try their hardest to wait until this little girl gets out of the frame. But in the end, they end up dropping the drone and the girl dies. So it brings into the question of, how do you justify if you should, if war is right, if this kind of violence is okay?
What is the value of a life? So it comes down to they start like talking about it in the sense of, okay, if these suicide bombers get out of this house and execute their plan, probably close to 80 to 100 people could die in a suicide bombing event versus this one little girl. So like, how do we interpret and weigh that decision? It's a really interesting movie. I think it really shows all the different opinions and like sides to the story. I think honestly everyone should have to watch it at some point, because it really kind of hits home with you while you're watching it as to what the United States has kind of gotten itself into with this drone program, and kind of the moral questions that we all probably would have after watching it. But it also kind of makes you think. It makes you a little bit uncomfortable, like, what is the other option,
And I think that, like what you're saying, with everyone should watch it. In our country, I feel like we tend to just say, oh, they did something bad, just drop a bomb on them. But we don't think of the innocent lives that it might also affect as well.
Exactly.
And so in this movie, you see how it portrays that little girl, she's so innocent. All she wants to do is just sell her bread.
Mm-hmm.
And so it brings into question of, you actually see this happening to that innocent life, rather than when we're just sitting in our homes watching the news, we're just, oh, go bomb them.
And it's reduced to a number instead of a personal story.
Yeah.
I think one of the issues with drones is that we see all these numbers, and like they said, we see them only as numbers. They're not really, we don't see the story like the one portrayed in Eye in the Sky. And the issue was collateral damage. That's why that whenever you use explosives as a weapon, that brings in exponentially increased possibility of collateral damage. They had
Talk about that
maybe 3 or 4 of the most of the people on the most wanted list, like in the top 10 of them on the most wanted list. It might have been just for Africa or just for that specific part of the world, but they had them all together. And
so how could you pass up that opportunity is kind of the question.
Yeah, and they were going to carry out an attack on just some public area, so they could.
You never really. They can't confirm it, but I mean, there's obviously throughout the whole movie you can see they're loading up suicide vests. But like, it's argued one of the people at the table, I guess you could say, she represents the Humanitarian Party. She's like, well, we can't really confirm that they're actually going to do this, but I mean, it looks like they are. Obviously, all of the weapons and stuff are there, but like, we can't really like confirm it, which is hard to.
This could be something the movie just did for its own purposes, but you also have to look at the motives of the general or whatever position she had, because she had been following this woman for 7 years. She'd been tracking her for 7 years, and this was like her major opportunity to get her. And they knew that the collateral damage was going to be much higher than it was, and she still went in
Mm-hmm.
and caused the death of this little girl, and basically told one of the people that works under her to lie in his report to say it was only a 45% chance that she'd be fatally injured, when in reality we all knew that it was higher than that.
And
Yeah, he estimated that.
Yeah, well, he estimated, but it was 25%. She fed that to him completely.
and the other day we read this paper by Wendell Berry. He's a Kentuckian, and he says, "Here's the other question that the predicament of modern warfare forces upon us. How many deaths of other people's children by bombing or starvation are we willing to accept in order that we may be free, affluent, and supposedly at peace? To that question I answer pretty quickly. None, and I know that I am not the only one who would give that answer. Please, no children. Don't kill any children for my benefit." And I think that whenever we were watching this movie, I just kept thinking of that paper, because it was all focused on this one little girl and how they were trying to save her. But in the end, like Sydney said, that
She still died anyways.
yeah, and they kind of lied on the report as to the percentage of the chance that she would have to live. So
The biggest issue within the movie was how many. We discussed the number 80 lives
Versus one.
versus the one of the little girl because of the potential suicide bombing attack. And so we had a discussion about weighing the one life of the innocent girl versus the 80 lives of the innocent people that were in the area of that were in the blast radius of the bombing, or that would be, because we bombed them before anything could happen. But it's a hard issue to discuss because it is an innocent little girl, and they struggle to throughout the movie to get the go ahead to attack. Well, actually, they did get the go ahead, but the guy that fired the missile did not want to. He didn't want to kill the little girl. He knew that there was going to be some serious issues happening, and that would probably include the death of that little girl. And it showed him crying over the possibility of this girl dying, but he had to follow orders. So he was pretty much forced to pull the trigger, or in this case, press the button. But at the same time, he didn't want to, and that really went into that explored the issue of whether or not the people dropping the bombs actually felt robotic or inhuman, and whether or not it matters to them or not. But that's not really the topic at hand here.
I think it could be.
It could be, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it goes to kind of start a discussion on first. I mean, you can get many different instances with that. You can think about how they were originally just supposed to be the eyes in the sky, kind of with the name of the movie, and how they weren't really supposed to be the people dropping or like pressing the button to send out the drone. So do the people that normally send out the drone, are they actually watching what is happening, or like we don't really know from that movie. So you can't really see if that will, like, if that repeated occurrence of having to kill people, if that desensitizes them, or if that causes them to feel that so much and hate themselves so much that just adds to the military suicide count.
And that's what I would like to bring up, is the fact that in this particular movie, the two soldiers that are in the striking room, I guess, they are actually controlling the drone. It's their first mission, and so you really get to see like their morals coming into it a lot. They're both crying, they're both upset the whole time, they're both like wrestling with themselves, you can tell. And at the end of the movie, after everything's done, their commander comes up to them and says, all right, both of you go home, get some rest. I need you back here in 12 hours. So that really hit home with me because it makes you think about, okay, how many times would that same situation have to happen where they have to kill someone innocent because of orders? And how many times would it take to desensitize you to what's actually happening? You know, how many times does it take of killing an innocent person that you just don't even think about it anymore? You don't even try to save that life. You're just following orders because you know that it's like pointless almost, which is sad. I mean, people want to blame the military for being insensitive to the value of a life, but I mean, a lot of them are just following orders, and a lot of them, the commanders in specific, are really they're war torn. I mean, they've seen horrible things throughout their lives, so I feel like that really probably influences their decision making abilities. And
it's like some of the only ways to not like get to that point to where you want to commit suicide is to just kind of shut down. So that
moral
to numb yourself to
kind
it.
of like what you were saying.
And I mean, I can understand, like, that's how humans psychologically deal with pain like that. They just numb themselves to it and don't think about it. I mean, if you didn't do that, you would go crazy. You'd go insane. So, I mean, it's not really, I feel like it's not the fault of people. We can't place blame on people because it's not really people. It's more of decisions and an idea and just war in general. Like, I feel like
And how we
people,
justify our decisions.
I feel like people in general are good. And I think that kind of gets lost sometimes when we talk about war and like the justifications of war. Well, I feel like everyone is kind of striving for good, but it's hard. It's just hard. And some of us don't have to make those some of us have to make those hard decisions. And I think that the blame goes on those people sometimes, which is sad. Because we're not in their place. We don't have to make those hard decisions, so we don't know what it's like.
And bouncing off of like how you view that people are always good, and I think that part of the thing is that even if we disagree with what someone else is doing, more than likely they're doing it because they think that's what's right, or they think that's what is going to help people rather than what's going to harm them. Because I think that's an instinct that we all have, is whether it's the right choice or the wrong choice, we're all thinking of, okay, how is this going to work out best? So I think that still kind of shows that people are trying to bring out the good.
So to sort of wrap this up, I guess, these are both really, really good issues, I think, to talk about, and you could talk about them forever. Refugees, especially, we're going to have to come to some decision soon. It's an election year, so I'm sure whoever's elected next will have a different foreign policy than Obama, and I think it's important for the public to be educated on like what all was happening, because a lot of people don't know. And then again with the drone thing, I think that's also a really hard topic to talk about, and it's very current, obviously. Should we use drones? Should we not? You know, what's the situation where we shouldn't? Those are all questions that we can just kind of leave open to you guys to interpret for yourselves. Anybody have any last comments before we wrap this up? Joe, got anything?
I was going to point out that I think our instructor said the other day that everybody else in the world besides America considers the use of drones to be a war crime or something. Is that correct? Like,
Something
like it's out of bounds. It's not something that you're supposed to be fooling around with. So that kind of adds to this mentality that America thinks it's above the law, thinks that it's above everybody else. That's a whole nother discussion to delve into, and I don't really have time to discuss it. As a matter of fact, I don't feel we've been going for a while on this particular podcast, and I still don't feel like we've addressed these issues. I mean, it would take a while for them to be discussed adequately. I don't even feel like we've covered it. Well, it's just been the tip of the iceberg just for these probably about 40 minutes maybe. But you know, we in the movie Eye in the Sky, we took the shot. We decided that the 80 mattered more than the potential one life lost, and it really was an issue of safety versus casualties and collateral damage. Um, and Wendell Berry said, "How many people's children will we have to kill before we are at supposed peace?" Um, I the child dying was not something that was asked for. Um, it was an unfortunate casualty of that, but at the same time, good was done. And I'm not justifying the child's death. I didn't want that child to die. It was a movie, and it still broke my heart. And I mean, it's just it's really, really hard to talk about.
You kind of have to get it. I just feel like you have to get it with a lot of these issues. You have to get above the personal setbacks, I guess you could say. I don't know. It's just hard to talk about. So I guess the question we would try to leave you with is, what do you think in terms of how much moral questioning should come into this? You know, what should we look at it logistically or morally? And that's just a hard thing. That differs with every single person. So thank you all for tuning in with us for these past 3 or 4 weeks. We hope that you continue to tune in and leave comments and questions and email us at viewfromthetowrpodcast2@gmail.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We will maybe be putting up new videos soon. I'm not sure. We haven't really talked about it yet, but thank you for your time, and we'll see you again soon, hopefully.